Welcome to an episode of Strategic Conversations. We host insightful discussions with top business leaders and top business minds. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we are hosting Mr. Steve Freeman, the Chief Procurement Officer for Chevron. Mr. Freeman will be a speaker at the Houston Strategy Forum's upcoming 11th annual Supply Chain Symposium. Mr. Freeman is a returning speaker, and we have been privileged to host him before. We welcome him back and are truly excited to host him. I am Ravi Kathuria, the president of the Houston Strategy Forum and author of the management and leadership book, How Cohesive is Your Company, and author of Happy Soul, Hungry Mind. Strategic conversations are hosted by the Houston Strategy Forum. If you value these conversations, please hit like and subscribe to the Houston Strategy Forum's YouTube channel. Today's episode is sponsored by Cohegic, a management consulting and executive coaching firm. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion with Mr. Freeman. Steve, sir, it is so good to see you. You're looking so good. I appreciate
You are too, Ravi. You are too.
Sir, thank you.
We just keep telling each other that.
We should. I like that. Sir, I'm so excited to have you back. Thank you so much. I think we have hosted you multiple times at the Houston Strategy Forum. I really, you're such a blessing. We thank you for coming back. Sir, at the risk of shooting myself in the foot, what is it that brings you back to the Houston Strategy Forum? Why do you, sir, take the time to come to the Houston Strategy Forum?
Yeah, Ravi, I've been in this role now for 4.5 years. And really, I see it as a connection point. I've really enjoyed the relationships with my fellow procurement officers, supply chain officers, both for producers as well as suppliers, as well as industry experts. So I think it's building relationships, but also just an opportunity to have unvarnished conversations about what's going on in our industry and hear what's on people's minds.
Yes, no, I appreciate it. We yes, sir. Like you, we're blessed that the top supply chain leaders come and engage in the Houston Strategy Forum. They take their time, but to your point, they have an unvarnished, candid discussion. Chatham House rules, so it allows us to be real. Unlike other conferences where the conversation is superficial, ours is yes, we get into the issues. I appreciate that, sir. So thank you for coming back. Looking forward to having a great discussion February 7th at our supply chain symposium. Steve, people are obviously familiar with Chevron, global company. Your role as the head of procurement at Chevron, but I feel sometimes people don't really have a full sense of the sheer magnitude of your role and your responsibilities. So if you would help my audience understand the breadth and scope and give them a sense for, look, this is what I have to deal with when I wake up in the morning, right?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to talk about that. I guess the first thing I would say is that my organization and the function, supply chain function within Chevron, manages everything from strategic sourcing, contracting, procurement, P2P, but also the supply chain operations. So we manage logistics, marine logistics, land logistics, freight forwarding, aviation services, and more recently, corporate real estate. So it's quite a broad span. Yeah. And from a spend perspective, we manage about $25 billion of third-party spend globally. Essentially, all third-party spend is managed through our function, and this has been an evolution. The scope of what we do has become fully end-to-end, not just from a procurement perspective, but also from an operations perspective. So it's come a long way.
But Steve, let's jump into the few questions that I have here. We're sitting in 2024. What are the challenges that you're seeing globally right?
Well, yeah, thanks for that question. And I feel like a little bit of context is important here. I've been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and really since the early 70s, the oil and gas industry's been through a multiple cycles of boom and bust. And
Yes.
and in a way, the last 5 years are no different,
Yes.
except that the pace of change, the cycle,
Yeah.
has accelerated, and the drivers are very different than what we've seen historically. In early 2020, we experienced, as you know, a crash in oil prices
Yes.
triggered by a global pandemic, which is unlike anything we'd seen in 100 years.
Yes.
And this resulted in port closures, reconfigured supply chains across the globe, capital spending dramatically scaled back, geopolitical shifts caused by companies rethinking the risks and rewards of globalization, acute changes in the way we work, both in the field and in the office, some of which are really part of a new normal. So that's one thing. Once the vaccine became widely available, we saw the global economy bounce back rapidly.
Yes.
Supply chains failed to keep pace with resulting growth in demand. We saw highest inflation since the early 1980s, impacting every sector of the economy, including energy.
Yes.
Another part of the story is that we've seen recently some profound impacts of climate change, bringing what I call energy transition to the forefront and triggering an acceleration of investment in renewable energies, which has been amplified by policies like the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes.
More recently, we've seen tragic wars in the Ukraine and Gaza that have had profound impacts in the way we think about the stability of Eastern Europe and the Middle East, as well as the risks of escalating conflict disrupting global stability that we've enjoyed for the past 6 years. And then the last thing is that technology, of course, is constantly changing, but we've seen a very rapid, I'd say, acceleration in the pace of technological advancement. Some observers claim that the technology growth curve with generative AI is the fastest growth curve in the history of technology.
Yes.
And with that rapid digitalization of business and several high-profile cyber attacks, in the headline, cybersecurity has emerged as a standing topic
Yes.
in boardrooms across industry. So all of these events have impacted global supply chains in profound ways. And in fact, never in my 40 years in the industry has supply chain been such a prominent word in the public
Yes.
lexicon.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's the context, I think, for today's conversation.
Yes. No, I appreciate that context. You touched on so many things, and then we talk about everything from the geopolitical challenges. You mentioned Ukraine, Gaza. What the Houthis are doing. We don't know how this will escalate. Ukraine is beginning to attack Russia oil facilities, right? And so the oil markets. You talked about volatility. We don't know what 2024 will bring, right? And so we have geopolitical challenges, but we still have supply chain challenges, right? The cost escalations, the pandemic brought that, and we're working on fixing that supply chains, but they still haven't gotten to the point, right? We're sitting in 2024. So as you look at it, as you manage this huge aspect for Chevron, what is it that you are? What are the top two or three that you are focused on? You said these are my biggest challenges in 2024. How do I? What are you watching very closely?
Well, first of all, the top of the list is honestly contributing to delivering competitive performance.
Yes.
And one of the evolutions of supply chain over the last years is that historically supply chain has been sort of responsible for delivering what the business asks for.
Yes.
But given the complexities in the world that we live in, I think the role of supply chain managers has changed. We've got a prominent seat at the table. We're expected to deliver resilient supply chains, innovative solutions to assure supply in a world where supply chains are challenged at times, to ensure competitive cost,
Yes.
to drive efficiency, but at the end of the day, to deliver value to the business. So, whether it's leveraging technology, whether it's supplier management, whether it's watching what competitors are doing and making sure we're at the leading edge of best practice. These are some of the things, and of course, with energy transition, that's also a key area of focus for us.
Yes, sir. Steve, before you took over managing procurement for the company, you have extensive operational and business experience, right? You were and so I loved when you talked about how supply chain has to have a strategic have a seat at the strategic table, right? And it's something we're going to talk about on February 7th, because we still find in other companies that's how have you worked on making supply chain get that recognition? Where does supply chain report into in CVX, and how are you constantly reminding the operational and business executives of the importance of criticality and the strategic nature of supply chain?
Well, interestingly, most senior executives at Chevron don't need to be told how important supply chain is to the business. They've seen it firsthand. But that said, the way we're sort of organized is maybe a bit different. We have a center supply chain organization that has both business facing leaders as well as discipline leaders who are focused on category management, logistics, materials management, to name a few, as well as real estate and aviation. Within each of our business units, we have embedded supply chain managers. And I think we've done a fantastic job over the last few years of really, first of all, rationalizing the work that's done in the center and the work that's done in the business, being very flexible and partnering on the work we do, so that the work can be moved from here to there, depending on ebbs and flows in activity. So that's sort of the operational level. In terms of the way I interact and my leadership team interacts with the business, each of my upstream general manager is very closely connected to the head of upstream. My downstream general manager is very closely connected to the head of downstream. We have a procurement advisory board that's made up of senior leaders in both our operations, in the technical center, in finance, and in law, and that's the body that we have deep conversations about strategically where we're going in the function, and then I myself report into the vice chairman. Really, the way our brand is to be a world-class partner organization.
Yes.
And a world-class partner organization means supporting the business, but helping the business to be better.
I love that. I love this integrated approach, because business, obviously executives and operational leaders are very busy running operations, and sometimes they overlook, right, supply chain, because it's not top of their mind. But having supply chain integrated is important, because then they can reach out, right? If you're running into somebody and you see them constantly, you can ask a question at the water cooler or in the restroom that you won't think about asking, right? And so this interaction, this flow of ideas, information is very important, not to mention the human connection, right? I appreciate that and applaud you for that. Sir, we talked about supply chain having a strategic seat at the table. every oil and gas company on earth is going through a strategic shift. You talked about energy transition at the Houston Strategy Forum. We use the phrase energy evolution because we energy transition I find is a little myopic, right? But energy evolution is what is happening, is the new energy economies have, right? The world is facing its energy crisis and a climate crisis and its solutions for both. So these strategies are changing, new energy is coming in. How are you positioning supply chain both for new energy projects? Chevron is executing many big new energy projects, but also to reduce carbon footprint throughout the enterprise, right?
Well, that's a great question, Ravi. First I want to start by saying I believe we're at the center of one of the world's greatest challenges,
Yes.
which is to meet the energy needs of a growing world with lower carbon. Personally, I see this as the moonshot of the next 2 decades.
Yes.
And while safely landing a man on the moon in 1969 was a truly amazing accomplishment, I'd submit to you and to everybody listening that the energy evolution will be even more difficult and even more important to mankind.
Yes.
So to understand this, it's important to understand that the scale of the energy system is enormous. It's complex and it's growing. It requires over $50 trillion of investment. That's trillion with a T over the next 2 decades.
Yes.
And it's important to understand that the cars, the trucks, the airplanes, the industrial equipment, the power plants, the buildings that are in use today were built to run on the current energy system. And replacing all of this equipment and changing evolving the energy system, as you say, will be enormously expensive, will come with its own environmental impacts. And because of this, this evolution will take time. We believe that energy is essential to modern life, that the future of energy is lower carbon, which is why we're investing in people and technology and capital to lower the carbon intensity of our existing business, but also to grow new low carbon businesses. And I'd say from a supply chain perspective, none of this would be possible without the work we do in supply chain.
Yes.
And we have 3 distinct roles. The first is to support lowering the carbon intensity of our existing oil, gas, and products business.
Yes.
The second is to build new supply chains to support new business lines like renewable fuels, like CCUS, hydrogen offsets, advanced geothermal. And I tell people almost every day that new business lines mean new supply chains. And there's really important strategic work going on in that space. And then the third area is to really for supply chain to lead in developing strategies to lower scope 3 emissions. That's the carbon emissions in our supply chains, and to do so in partnership with our suppliers. So my message with regard to energy evolution is that supplying affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner energy is the challenge of a generation. And if you love a challenge, there's never been a more exciting time to be in the energy industry and to be a part of the supply chain function.
I loved what you said, because I at the forum I remind people that in the 1990s and the 2000s, the innovation was there in Silicon Valley. They drove innovation. But this is Houston's time. This is Texas time. This is where we have, and to your point, we landed a man on the moon. But this problem that we face is going to have far greater consequences for humanity. We need to solve this. We need all the innovation. I can't wait, sir, to have a conversation on February 7th, because you talked about these 3 aspects of supply chain, right? And I want to dive into that, especially as it pertains to energy evolution. How does supply chain evolve? How are things changing? I want to get into that discussion, and I hope I would love for this video to go on, but what I'm going to do is get my audience and request them to come join us February 7th, and come brainstorm with Mr. Freeman on how supply chain needs to go to the next level, because we have a huge challenge and we have a huge opportunity. With the estimates from anywhere from 50 trillion to all the way to 200 trillion, right? about the opportunity. And all of that has to go through, all of that money has to be spent through supply chain. So come discuss on February 7th on how do we spend that 50 trillion. If
Very
that
good.
doesn't excite you, I don't know what does.
I agree with you. Look forward to seeing you there, and everybody who's watching, look forward to seeing you there as well.
Thank you, Steve. Looking forward to it. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Take care.